This is Life Epistles. Our objective on this channel is to provide information about life so that you can improve upon your spirituality and how you lead your life. We are open-minded on this channel. We are also passionate about spiritual matters, especially esoteric teachings, the Christian way. We do not indoctrinate, but simply present matters about life as truthfully as we can. We do not attack other teachings or practices. Neither do we portray that we are the best. Welcome to the 7th episode, and the topic is positive versus negative spiritual development. Our source of information is the Western wisdom teachings, also known as Esoteric Christianity. My name is Seddoh Bokor. Let us begin, and as usual, with a self-test. Question number 1. If you should have spiritual power, what will you use it for? And here are the possible answers. It's either yes or no. A. Punish your enemies. B. Display it for people to know that you are powerful. C. Solve your material problems concerning finance, lands and buildings, business, marriage, and health. Note, if you choose a yes answer to any of the questions, then you cannot be on the path of positive spiritual development. Why do we say so? Stay tuned as we explain. What are our learning objectives? By the end of the presentation, you should identify the difference between positive spiritual development and negative spiritual development, and also be familiar with the characteristics of positive spiritual development. What is our content for the presentation? Of course, we're going to give you a recap. We will define what is spiritual development. We'll give the rationale. We'll look at the importance, the types that we have, the characteristics, and then we will conclude. For today, our reference is lecture number 2, which is about the various bodies of a human being, and lecture number 3, which is the various worlds and how human beings are linked. Let us do a recap of the things that we have said that have a bearing on what we are going to talk about today. We have 3 major points we're going to raise. The first point is that we said the physical world as we see it is not the only one. There are other worlds. Overall, there are 7 worlds, beginning in the world of God to the physical world. All the 7 worlds are contained within God of our solar system, not gods of other solar systems. Just as there are 7 worlds, so it is that human beings, every human being, has 4 material bodies and 3 spiritual vehicles that link us to those 7 worlds. That links every human being to those worlds. The last of the 7 worlds is the physical one that we have, especially the chemical region, which comprises solid, liquid, and gas. The chemical region emanates from the higher worlds. The chemical region is not by itself. It is an emanation from the higher worlds, and it is held in place and sustained by the higher worlds. It has a slower vibration of atoms and subject to the law of gravity, distance, time, expansion, and contraction. But these laws do not apply to the higher worlds. Beyond the chemical region, the immediate region we said earlier on is the etheric region. The 5 senses that human beings use, we all use, is limited to only the chemical region. It doesn't extend to the higher worlds. As such, supersensory or spiritual faculties are required to consciously enter and function in the higher worlds. Our second major point, as summary, is that humanity, all of us in general, has completed the first half of the 4 stages that the spirit is journeying through. The next is to consciously go through the upper spiral path towards perfection. That is talking about the etheric region, the desire world, and the world of thought. The immediate higher world or higher region is the etheric region, and it is referenced in the Bible as a new heaven, a new earth. Revelations chapter 21, verse 1. During our involution, when the spirit was coming down, the etheric region was called the Garden of Eden in the Old Testament. Humanity lived there, and we were spiritually conscious. We were not then externally conscious until we had our awareness opened to the external world, and that was termed the fall of man in the Bible. Once again, we bring to you the diagram of the Spirit's pilgrimage through matter. This is very essential. And we did this first in lecture number 4. If you look to the left-hand side, where we have involution to depict the Spirit coming down through the material worlds, it was unconscious. But where we have the chemical region, the 4th stage, its unconsciousness was changed and the spirit became self-conscious. Generally, half of the 4th stage has been completed. What is left now is to move upwards. And going upwards, we said, is evolution. In evolution, we are transforming our self-consciousness to omniscience. That is what this diagram depicts. From the point where humanity acquired external or self-consciousness, we must go on and develop our material bodies and spiritual faculties without any direct outside compulsion. In that regard, we were given free will to exercise. And the means of development is about expansion in our experience, our will, our reason, and our creativity. These are the elements that are to take over from the direct higher beings who were then leading us. It does not mean that the higher beings have washed their hands off. No. But they have given us free will to exercise. And we are to expand in our experience, our will, our reason, and our creativity. The third major point in terms of background to today's presentation is that this dense body, as we all have, cannot and will not take us through the higher worlds, as in the case when we sleep. When we sleep, this dense body does not take us to the higher worlds. In sleep, the spirit withdraws without us exercising our will. The spirit automatically withdraws by itself. We don't exercise our will. The body remains on the bed as the spirit naturally enters the spiritual worlds with other bodies, especially the desire body and the mental body. Now, in lecture number 6, we said that the soul is an extract from the right and efficient use of the material bodies. That is what we said. The soul is an extract. Please take note. When enough essence of good deeds have been accumulated by the individual, a body is formed. And that body is the spiritual body or soul body. And it has soul powers. So when the individual has done enough good to a certain extent, the soul aspect transforms into a body, and the individual can consciously enter and function in the higher spiritual worlds. Apostle Paul informs us that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. He states that we have a spiritual body. If you read 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 44 and 45, it is clearly stated, and that we shall meet the Lord in the air when he comes. This physical body cannot do that, but the soul body or the spiritual body does that. Having established these 3 points, let us now look at the main lecture for the day. We begin with what is spiritual development. We now want to define it. Spiritual development is a process. It is not a one-off event. It is a process to unfold an individual's supersensory faculties and latent spiritual powers. Once that is done, through that, the individual can do the following among others. He or she knows the arts and crafts and can apply the laws of nature appropriately. The individual can do that. And he or she can enter into the higher worlds and function consciously. That is what spiritual development seeks to do. What are the types of spiritual development? Basically, there are 2 types of spiritual development. The positive voluntary development and negative involuntary development. Now, we need to clarify this. When we say negative involuntary spiritual development, we are not condemning practitioners. Neither do we say the practice is wrong or bad. Ours on this channel is to provide information for the individual to appreciate and make a choice. Why spiritual development? This is the answer. The pilgrimage of the spirit commences in the world of God through matter so that the spirit can gain experience and become, first, a creative intelligence, and second, add value to the Godhead. So we human beings, as spirits, have reached the lowest point of the material worlds. We cannot go down any further. The material lessons have been learned or are being learned. half of the pilgrimage through matter has been completed. And the job now is to go back to the world of God. So you can see clearly that our job now as human beings is to work on our spiritual vehicles. Importantly, the physical world will come to an end. It will disintegrate, starting with the chemical region. In that regard, the Earth planet, our planet, this planet is undergoing changes towards that day. Some people joke about it when it is said that the Earth planet is undergoing changes towards that end. But when you look at science, it gives us indications that things are changing. For example, we are running out of life-sustaining gases, including hydrogen and nitrogen. And these are very important gases. Carbon dioxide is also on the increase. Are we having enough fresh water? It's dwindling. How about the ozone layer? It is depleting very fast. And it is said between 7 and 8 billion years from now, the sun will burn out its energy. It means the sun will die. Somebody will say, oh, but when that happens, billion years to come, no more here. No. If you have an appreciation of the spiritual world and how you are connected, you wouldn't say so. There is more to it. To this end, if you read 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 6, it is written there, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. And when you go to verse 7, but the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment, a perdition of ungodly men. If you go to verse 10, it reads, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also, and the works that are therein, shall be burned up. So definitely, this earth planet will be transformed into an etheric one. What is the importance of spiritual development? What is the importance? Beyond the chemical region of the physical world, the next phase of the pilgrimage of the spirit is to regain the spiritual world consciously. And it is only those who qualify who can enter into the etheric region consciously. Spiritual development, therefore, enables the individual to develop the appropriate faculties to operate in the higher worlds. Let us take note. Just as the spirit used the material bodies for its descent through the material worlds to gain self-consciousness, so shall it use the spiritual body or soul body consciously for its upwards spiral progression through the spiritual worlds. It means we're not going to use this physical body. It is the extract that we are going to use. And that extract is the soul body or the spiritual body. What are the characteristics of that spiritual body or soul body? The soul body or the spiritual body needs neither food, as we know it now, nor shelter, nor sleep. It doesn't need it. It doesn't need them. It knows no disease, sorrow, or death compared to what we have now as regards to the dense body. And this is the other one. It is superior to the 4 elements. The spiritual body or the soul body is superior to the 4 elements, which means that the four elements cannot defeat it. It can go through them. You're talking about solids or earth, liquid or water, gas or air, and fire. The soul body can go through them. And also, magnificently, it can materialize in a dense form and also dissolve itself. That is one very important quality of the soul body we are talking about, that it can materialize into dense body just as we are in this dense body, and it can also dissolve. That is what the spiritual body can do. We will talk more about the soul body as soon as permissible on this channel. As soon as possible, we will talk about it so that people will know that the soul that we talk about eventually leads to the building of the soul body. And it is the soul body that we are going to use consciously to travel through the spiritual worlds. There are classes of people when it comes to spiritual development in this world. Broadly, there are two categories of people. One category includes the multitudes who are engaged in material pursuits. They are looking for things of this world and by and large are out of touch with the spiritual worlds. The connection between the vital body and this dense body is so tight in those people. It's not loose to promote any spiritual work. It's so tight. That is for the multitude. And then there is another category of people. They are the sensitives. For those people, the connection between the dense body and the vital body is loose. So they are more sensitive to spiritual things. Now, between these sensitives, there are two categories or two classes of sensitives, those who are attuned to the spiritual world or to the spiritual vibration. We have the voluntary, positively developed person, and we have the involuntary, negatively developed person. Here is a depiction, this diagram that gives us a look at the positively developed person, how his or her spiritual currents move. The currents move in a clockwise direction. The second picture indicates the negatively developed person, and the vibration, the currents, move in either clockwise direction. This is how it is. But there is one commonality between them. Both classes are sensitive to the spiritual vibrations. They are above the ordinary people who more or less know nothing, are ignorant of the spiritual world. Let us now talk about the positive spiritual development. In lifetime, a human being is required to become more soulful, to do more of the good things, to develop the soul qualities. And key to the development of these soul qualities are these two things: conscience and virtue. Those things are to guide our conduct. Virtue and conscience. So as progressively the individual focuses more on things that are virtuous and the conscience becomes sharper and sharper, something happens. The individual ceases to operate in the lower desires, but focuses more on the higher desires. You can reference our lecture number 2, number 3, and number 6, where we talk about this into details. Let us take note. The higher desires and living the good life, they impact the two higher ethers of the vital body. We ever talk about the vital body before, and we said that the reflecting ether and the light ether are the two higher aspects. We'll be seeing them again. Let us remember that the extract from the threefold material bodies, we are talking about the dense body, the vital body, and the desire body. That extract constitutes the threefold soul. Now, progressively, as we use the conscious soul, the intellectual soul, and the emotional soul, they as one transform and give birth to the spiritual body, to the soul body. What we are supposed to do is to be doing the good things, operate in the higher worlds. Our higher desires are very important. What are the dangers of materiality? Materiality has a serious danger on the vital body. Materiality satisfies at best only the two lower ethers of the vital body, which don't add anything to our spiritual growth. The two higher ethers are for our spiritual growth. So when we focus more on materiality, we are hardening the connection between the two lower ethers and the two higher ethers. It will be difficult for them to separate, and our spirituality will be affected. We have a diagram to portray this. In fact, we show this in our lecture number 2. In this diagram, you see the physical world or the physical body. We have the etheric region and we have the chemical region. The etheric region has 4 ethers. 2 higher ones, the reflecting ether and the light ether, and 2 lower ones, the life ether and the chemical ether. All of them form the vital body. But when we operate in the higher desires, we lead the good life sufficiently, a separation comes between the 2 lower ethers, that is the life ether and the chemical ether, and the 2 higher ethers, the reflecting ether and the light ether. The 2 higher ethers separate from the light ether and the chemical ether. That is important for our spiritual growth. If they don't separate, we are still ordinary. We haven't achieved much. Now, if you look at the chemical region or the dense body, comprising gas, liquid, and solid, they are maintained by the 2 lower ethers. To the left-hand side, you can see the responsibility of the 2 lower ethers, the life ether and the chemical ether, is to maintain this dense body. So if we are into materiality, we are only maintaining this body. We are not impacting our spiritual ethers. But when you look at the reflecting ether and the light ether, they lead to the building of the soul body. You can see the golden color over there. That is where the reflecting ether and the light ether, when they separate, it means they have built the soul body or the spiritual body. This is how it works with this particular diagram. Now, we also have dangers for the low desires. Low desires don't add anything to our spiritual growth or to the higher regions of soul life, soul light, and soul power. Low desires don't add anything to them. So anybody who is operating with low desires is only picking materials from the lower desire world of this planet. And those lower desires eventually must be purged when the spirit eventually leaves the body in a state that we call death. Once again, we're talking about the low desires: hatred, jealousy, stealing, deception, bearing false witness, arrogance, cheating, drunkenness, racism, brutality, sensuality, abuse of others' rights. These are low desires. Bias, insincerity, greed. These are all low desires that don't add anything to our spiritual development. but the high desires do. Fairness, love, the unconditional one, altruism. You are caring and sharing with people. You are truthful. You have self-control, and you pursue spiritual things. You like making peace. You have selfless service. Those are the things that add to our spiritual growth. You have sympathy for people. You have empathy as well. You don't say, it doesn't concern me. When you have that brotherly, sisterly feeling for others, you are adding more to your spiritual development. And once again, we have a diagram to depict it. You can see the red color, our low desires, passion and sensual desires. They occupy the bottom rung of the desire world. Let us not operate more often over there. Let us operate more often at the top, where we have the high desires that lead to soul power, soul light, and soul life. It is important, but it's not just a day's work, it is progressive. Let's keep reminding ourselves, and we improve upon ourselves. Now, the spiritual body, or the soul body, is therefore the aggregate of the extract from our good deeds. The good things that we do cumulatively lead to the building of the spiritual body or the soul body. It is a gradual process. The positive spiritual development is a gradual process most often. And it depends primarily on the good things that we have done to our neighbor. It may take years for that to develop. It may be a lifetime, but eventually, once you are doing the good things, it will manifest. So, the higher desires are fundamental to positive spiritual development. That is very, very important. A poignant fact that the higher desires only, and no any other one, lead to the development of spiritual powers positively and voluntarily. Now, let's talk a bit about the soul body. We have said that cumulatively, our good deeds, the three aspects of the soul, the conscious soul, the intellectual soul, and the emotional soul, they lead to the building of the soul body or the spiritual body. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 1 to 5, we have the details over there. But let's read. For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this we groan earnestly, desiring to be clothed upon with our house, which is from heaven. If so be that, being clothed, we shall not be found naked. This talks about the spiritual body, the soul body, that is built based on the good things that we do. In summary, positive, voluntary spiritual development comes from two major sources. One, living the good life, having the higher desires. They will lead to the separation of the two higher eaters from the two lower eaters. The second is the spiritual exercises that will bridge the gap between the pituitary and the pineal glands and increase their vibration. That is how positive spiritual development comes about. The individual who achieves consciously leaves this dense body and enters into the spiritual world. The person can see and function over there. He or she doesn't have to die before going there. What are the characteristics of such a person? The one who has positively, voluntarily developed spiritually. The individual who pursues positive voluntary spiritual development lives a pure spiritual life and devotes himself or herself to selfless service to others. Selfless service to others. He or she has the vibration under his or her control. He controls the vibration of the spiritual organs as well. By his or her own will, the person has the power to see in the higher worlds. That power is constant, and the person can use it at his or her discretion for good, and no any other. Such a positively developed person is fully conscious in the spiritual world as in the material world, and after awakening in the morning is well aware of what he or she has done in the spiritual world. But we are not talking about a dream. No, this is not a dream. The positive spiritually developed individual consciously comes out of his or her body through the head, not any other part of the body, not the lower limb, but through the head. That is the positive development. Such a person, when he or she is traveling spiritually, can never be seen by the naked eye. That cannot happen. Only few people among humanity have developed that as of now. They use their abilities in the service of humanity. They are selfless and they operate on the quiet without calling attention to themselves or their spiritual powers. The faculties in positive or voluntary spiritual development, once achieved, once you have attained that, remains with the person permanently. It is integrated to the spirit. You cannot lose it once you continue to conduct yourself well. You can never lose that faculty. If we wish to work with the trend of evolution, going back to God, individually and collectively, if we want to work in that way, we should strive to develop positively, not negatively. It is wise to cultivate those good qualities along the proper lines, only that which promotes evolutionary progress and the power to be of service to humanity and to God. That's the motivation. What is the benefit of knowing about positive spiritual development? Is there any benefit at all? To answer this question, we need to go back to episode 1 and look at the classes of people in this world and their philosophy about the purpose of life. That counts a lot. Our philosophy about why we are here, what are we required to do, and where do we go from here is key to how we conduct ourselves. Now, let us look at the ignorant or ordinary person. Such a person has no idea about spiritual things and will not even bother to spend time and listen to anything. For such a person, it's a waste of time. A complete waste of time. Why is it so? Because he or she is yet to have spiritual awakening. The time hasn't come yet. Not that somebody is keeping the time away, but the person has not prepared himself sufficiently to be awakened spiritually. How about the materialist and the scientist? What is their viewpoint regarding this we call spiritual development, the positive one? The materialist will express doubt. That is number one for the materialist. He or she will be doubtful and will even put up an argument and eventually deny that there is anything like spiritual development. That is what the materialist will do. Always doubting things that go beyond material things. How about the scientist? Well, he will ask, can it be proven scientifically? If not, then the claim that there is spiritual development is not supported. At best, the scientists will prefer relying on instruments that reveal things beyond the 5 senses. Scientists will prefer quantum science, because to a very large extent, it can be proven materially. But the instruments that are being used go beyond the five senses. We'll talk about parapsychology or paratechnology, even nanotechnology. The scientists will probe all that. But the instruments that are being used are beyond the five senses. So, delicate equipment to gather data about unseen things and try to make material sense out of them is the preoccupation of some of these scientists. They do intelligent analysis and to some extent can prove that we have the fourth dimension, fifth dimension, and so on. And these things, you cannot see them with your naked eyes. These are dimensions beyond the five senses, which means there is something higher than just the material things. Some of the scientists may probe the phenomenon of time travel, teleporting, shape-shifting, wormholes, remote viewing, and so on. They probe all that because these things are beyond just the ordinary five senses. They will develop imaging equipment and techniques, for instance, the X-ray, CT scan, MRI, and what have you. But they will refuse to acknowledge that human beings have faculties within themselves that can make them see beyond the material things and even enter into the superphysical realms. It's surprising. But there's a big but. Some scientists indeed accept that there are things beyond the physical. Some of them are truthful and admit that their inventions originated while they were asleep. You can talk about the theory of relativity, insulin, the periodic table, Benzene ring structure, the sewing machine. All these are confirmation that things were taken from the world beyond and brought down. Page rank Google algorithm. It is the same pattern that there are things beyond the physical. How will the religious person accept when it is mentioned positive spiritual development? The religious person will agree that there is spiritual development, no two ways about it. The religious person will agree that there is spiritual development. But it is based on favor or blessings from God. That is what a typical religious person will say. He or she may seek explanations, but will deny that human beings can do anything about it. He or she leaves everything to God and keeps holding on to faith. That is not a bad thing to do. How about the esoteric person? The one who seeks spiritual knowledge. He or she knows for certainty that there is spiritual development, and it is the reason for which human beings are on earth. The esoteric Christian knows that there is spiritual development, and what should be done to increase the pace of his or her spiritual development positively. Having talked about positive, voluntary spiritual development, we are now going to talk about the negative spiritual development. The pineal gland and the pituitary glands, they are two very important spiritual organs that we all have. But in most people, they are dormant. Long time ago, when we were descending within God of our solar system, those two organs were the means by which we were connected spiritually. The two organs are connected or were connected to the involuntary nervous system, not the voluntary. They were connected to the involuntary nervous system and invested us with spiritual gifts. We see things spiritually. We do things spiritually. And we have a diagram of it, the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. And we give credit to brainstuff.org. These two organs, as we said, were key when we were coming down in the world of God to this physical world. Now let's see how it develops. We could then perceive and function in the spiritual worlds when we're having these two organs connected to the involuntary nervous system. Some people still have those two organs in that position, still active in the involuntary system. Some people still have the two organs connected to the involuntary nervous system, and they are able to do things spiritually. But most people, most part of humanity have moved away from that. When I say that they have moved away, it does not mean that they are not operating with the voluntary system. No. But what I mean is that the pituitary gland and the pineal gland are no more active in those people. Majority of humanity, that is no more happening. Now, the involuntary spiritual development is along the negative path. When the person is still having the pineal gland and the pituitary gland connected to the involuntary nervous system, that is a development along the negative path. Why is it so? Such a person with that faculty makes no effort to submit the faculty under his or her own domination. It's automatic, so the person doesn't do anything about it. It comes just naturally. But that is not the way it's supposed to be. We are supposed to move away from that to the higher one. So, it might not even occur to such a negatively developed person to subject the faculty under his or her own domination. That is what ought to be done. So long as the negative faculty is exercised by means of the involuntary nervous system, it is never under the control of the will of the person. So the power, the faculty is erratic. It is on and off in nature. Such a negatively developed person cares less about the higher desires. This is one of the characters. Such a negative developed person cares less about the higher desires, operates more in the lower desires. And such a person wants quick results and is ready to use the power for personal gain. That is how it is. He or she has no control over what is seen in the spiritual world or the experiences in the spiritual worlds. He or she is aware only of what comes before him or her and cannot even use the power for any reliable investigative purposes. Now, this is the catchword. Such a person may also come out of the body, but not through the head, never, but through other parts of the body, especially the lower limbs. Such a person can be seen with the physical eyes. Even in the night, such a person can be seen. What are the dangers to negative spiritual development? Now, negative spiritual development, those who follow that path allow themselves to come under the control of earth-bound spirits. So there are spirits who are interested in those who are developed negatively. Now, these earth-bound spirits, they make themselves look like spiritual guides, that they are going to guide such a person. In many cases, such spirits are dishonest entities. They will coerce the victim to do things that are terrible eventually. What do we mean by earth-bound spirits? We just want to explain this. These are persons who previously lived in the physical human bodies, but they remain bound to this earth planet after dying because of their strong desires for material things. So instead of following the path that is chosen after the spirit has dropped this physical body, because they were so materialistic, even after death, they are still stuck to the earth in pursuance of their materialistic desires. It's not only earthbound spirits that can coerce and deceive a negatively developed person. We also have elementals. They are spirits. They are everywhere. But they haven't reached the stage where they can take up material bodies like human beings. They are all over. They are interested in this physical body. So if we allow them, they can come and usurp our free will, pretending to be spirit guides. That is the danger of being a negative developed person. The individual who allows himself or herself to be under the guidance of such elementals and earthbound spirits is under a certain circumstance, and is not a means by which these earthbound spirits and elementals can manifest themselves or manifest physical things. They will use that person as a medium. Mind you, there are many spirits all over, desirous to manifest physically as we are doing it. They also want to. And when they have access to anybody, it can truly be said that the victim's life is no longer his or her own. They will use the body extremely. Why are we saying so? Every human being has a responsibility over his or her body, which is the temple of the original spirit that came with it. Any external entity trying to take over the body is an intruder, a thief. That is why we should allow that. That intruder will seize this body, misuse it, and deprive the original owner, the original spirit of that body. And we just do it anyhow because it is not the original owner of the body. It is therefore dangerous to leave your body for elementals to manipulate or earthbound spirits to manipulate. It is simply dangerous. We'll be seeing it more. This manifests in mediumship, where a spirit materializes through somebody. The earthbound spirit or elemental enters through the medulla oblongata of the body. And because of the loose connection of the dense body and the vital body, will draw the ether of the victim through the spleen, and it will use it for its own materialization. Then we might think that the person has power, the person has a lot of power. But it is an elemental or earthbound spirit that is using that person to manifest. Spirit controls. These are spirits that want to control people. Now, if you enter into mediumship, if you make yourself available for other entities, other spirits to use, once you enter into that, know that you are no longer yourself. Once a spirit control has gained ingress into your body, the victim loses the power to shut it out unless there is an external support. If he or she, that's the victim, is content to do what the intruding spirit wants, there is no trouble. There is no harassment. But in case the victim tries to protest, there will be a great agony for the victim. These entities can really be dangerous. Now, some of such intruding spirits, usually those who are least experienced, they are the most dangerous. Those spirits, the least experienced, they are the most dangerous. Because what they can do recklessly, they can push out your spirit and the higher vehicles. They can push them out of your body and take over the body and misuse it anyhow. They take temporary control or they take permanent control of the body. And this may lead to mental problems. Obsession may lead to mental problems. So it is important we are always on guard so that we don't open up through too much excitement our medulla oblongata for such spirits to intrude. We need to watch out. There is even more danger after death for the negatively developed person, the one who allows herself to be influenced by external spirits. There is more danger after death. The spirit that subjected the victim during earth life to its manipulation makes sure that after death, the victim serves it. So the victim is not free after death. The spirit now holds him or her down to serve it. And you can see how wicked such spirits can be in the other world. So we need to be careful when we allow other spirits to influence us to do things. The victim, in addition to experiencing torture on this earth, will be deprived of his or material bodies and spiritual aspects when the person has finally left this physical body down. Because the person now goes with the desired body, the mind, and the rest. This will be seized by that intruding spirit. And that will make that person lag in the going back to God, the evolutionary timetable. That individual will lag. Let us take note. But now it should be obvious that mediumship, coming into contact with other spirits to do things for us, and we think we are developed spiritually, is a negative practice. Anyone who does that is surrendering his free will to another entity. And that is not God's plan. The plan is we should use our free will, expand in our experience, our will, our conscience, and what have you. Not to submit that will to another entity. When such a person does so, he or she is hindering his own evolutionary progress. It is therefore extremely dangerous in terms of both life on earth and also life after passing, to give your free will to another entity to manipulate. Yet, many of the people are claimed to have spiritual powers today. Many people who are claimed to have spiritual powers, and they are receiving attention from the public. They have their spiritual development as negative and involuntary in character. And sadly, many of them do not even know that their spiritual development is along the negative path. That is the worst aspect of it. That many of them do not even know that the powers that they claim that they have is not developed from within, but it is based on an external entity. And that is negative spiritual development. That is not God's plan. That is not the Christian way. What are the examples? Psychics. People who can use their mind and do many things. There are people who sensitize the vital body, the desired body, and the rest. They do so by sitting in certain postures and physical exercises. They only sensitize, but they are not spiritually developed positively. And then the administration of certain medicines, drinks, incense, food, powder, herbs, and the rest. These are all negatively developed practices. Black magic, sorcery, divination, witchcraft, juju, even using of Ouija boards or crystal gazing. These are all negative ways of spiritual development. It's not coming from within. But please take note. We do not judge or condemn any one of them. We on this platform do not condemn any one of them. In time, we will explain why we say we do not condemn any one of the old traditional practices. We consider them as old traditional practices to spiritual development. Any form of spiritual development that does not come from within the individual, regardless of the impression it makes on people, does not qualify as positive, voluntary spiritual development. That we are saying on this platform. Both self-mastery and self-reliance, together with attendant positive spiritual growth are achieved only when we live noble and selfish lives, devoting our time to serving God and humanity, and keeping our thoughts and deeds pure and elevated. Those are the things we are talking about. That is how you develop from within your spiritual aspects. Only in this way can we strengthen the two higher ethers, develop our soul bodies, respond positively to the spiritual vibrations, and learn to avoid all external influence and dominance. Only when we feel within our innermost beings a holy, unselfish desire to help humanity can we begin to make progress in the direction of positive spiritual development. It is only that, to help humanity. That is how we develop positive spiritual development. Friends, we repeat that we do not condemn anybody or practice in spiritual development. Ours on this channel, Life Epistles, is to provide information about life so that you can make your choice where to go, to remain materialistic or choose the path that leads to positive spiritual development, or even the path that leads to destruction. There is also the option to remain with the multitude where there is slow movement towards spiritual development, or opt for faster movement by definite esoteric training, the Christian way, the true Christian way in preparation for the world to come, the new heaven and the new earth. And let us remember Matthew chapter 7, verse 13 and 14, where it is written, "Enter ye in at the straight gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it." The decision is yours. We hope you have learned something useful from episode 7. If you have any questions, you can write in the comment section. Let us meet again in our next lecture. And the topic is the hidden spiritual benefits of love and selfless service. We thank you very much. See you.